welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 66 with Zach Stoltzfus, and we're going to say hi to him in a second. If you enjoy what you hear today, you can follow us at becomecgpro.com in our free Facebook group. And really privileged to be able to introduce our guest for today, Zach, who is a director of photography, among other things, VFX soup and VP soup and all kinds of good stuff in the new era of creating content that we're in, of creating movies and other things. Zach actually studied with CG Pro for a minute there back in the day, and has been very busy since, creating an amazing movie, Max and Molly, in the future, and we're going to talk about that today, among other things. But Zach, great pleasure.
Hello.
To be here.
Thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. No, it's amazing just seeing where people take virtual filmmaking, and I think your story really speaks to how I think, as long as you've got the skills and experience, how you can create really quite a surprising amount of content as an individual creator or a small team of people. So I'm really looking forward to digging into it. It's always amazing seeing people that have gone through any of our classes or workshops and just seeing what happens next. So I've been really looking forward to talking about what you've been up to. I always love to start these off just by asking a little bit about you and how you got to this point, you know, whether film was something which you dreamed of doing as a child, if there was any movies that inspired you to want to get into this. How did it begin for you?
Well, I feel like I had a little bit of a roundabout way of getting where I am now, to some extent. I grew up in Virginia, in kind of very rural Harrisonburg area, and I made some films with friends, but I never considered it something that I was gonna do for anything past fun. So around that time, Lord of the Rings was coming out, and some friends of mine and myself said, hey, they'll do Lord of the Rings and we'll do a live action version of the Hobbit. So we convinced an English teacher of ours in high school to give us credit for some sort of book credit for studying the Hobbit and then remaking a bunch of scenes from that. And so me and a few other folks did this, and it was kind of an excuse for us to just get outside and get a bunch of big fake swords and do, very masculine, smack each other with swords and die dramatically on the battlefield. As well as a good friend practicing his Gollum voice. So had a lot of fun with that. And then I ended up being like, well, I'm maybe the most computer savvy person. I'll do a little VFX for this. So I used a piece of software called Animator, which was a free piece of software that was out and about for, I guess this would have been like 2005 or something like that. And I kind of got the ins and outs of that and had fun with that. And again, I just used it just for fun. It was just having fun. And I made some really horrible animations of dragons flying around and set extension sort of thing. It was terrible, absolutely garbage. And I wanted to go into science. I was going to do biotech or something like that. But when I looked at biotech, I kind of more seriously thought about what my day-to-day might be like. And I felt like I didn't want to spend most of my time in a lab working for pharmaceuticals. I really enjoyed collaboration on a more personal level and doing things with people that affected people, I think, more emotionally. And so senior year pretty much of high school, I took a shift and applied to Tisch, to NYU, and they were pretty much the only school I applied to. I applied to like a small school in Virginia that I'd never seriously wanted to go, and applied to Tisch and somehow got in. And so I went to Tisch without really having any serious background of thought of filmmaking. And I'm really lucky I got in. And then I'm so thankful for all the student loans they gave me. But ultimately, it was a really good experience. And I think that I got in there just saying I enjoy technical things. That is kind of my background. And I do like VFX. And I like to tell stories. And so from that position, we were shooting film, and just from the technical side, I thought that was cool to like learn about. So I started being DP on a bunch of projects from just because of the technical, and then started bringing, I think, the more creative side back into it. Never got back into VFX until kind of senior year. I was still doing things for people, like for friends on little projects. They were like, oh, I need this little thing tweaked here. And I'd be like, I'll open up something. And I was teaching myself After Effects at that point. So I took some coursework in Nuke, and then was like, I thought seriously about going into VFX. And once I graduated, and helped some friends with some much larger projects, and ended up getting involved with my friend Michael Litwack's senior thesis, which had a ton of VFX in it. And I did a good chunk of the VFX for that film for him. And then I didn't really want to like go to a studio and work for a studio, and the like indie film world of VFX in New York was like, nobody knows what to pay you. Nobody understands deadlines. So I was like, I'm stuck in this position where I'm kind of at home in a dark spot, like in my little apartment in New York. I want to get on set. I want to do stuff. So I stepped away from VFX entirely at that point. And again, still did it for friends, and then just became, shot short films, shot documentaries, shot all sorts of things. And then got to a point where now it's like coming full circle, and I'm bringing that back in to projects that I'm generally otherwise involved in anyway. So I was involved with Molly and Max, which is actually Michael Litwack's. He's the director on that as well. It's his first feature, and he knew that I did some VFX, and he likes to have, I think, a lot of crossover of crew, just to keep the crew very small. And so I said, yeah, let's hop on. Let's just do this, as much of it as the two of us can do. And that was kind of my pushback into VFX. So once I realized that was becoming a thing, I mean, I'd been interested in camera VFX for a little while and trying to figure that out. Once that project started getting going, I signed up for the class through CG Pro, and that class ended maybe 2 weeks before production. It was like right before we went into production. So I was like shooting tests on walls and stuff in New York while taking the class, and then kind of getting a lot of good tips there before then immediately getting thrown in.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a roundabout saying, yeah, I'm kind of back into this thing, this mode of just like making stuff with Molly and Max with friends, and it feels in an interesting way very similar to how it all started in high school. Just like wanting to hang out with friends, and then being like, oh, you can also do that. Let's try it. Let's see what you can do, how far we can take some of these things. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, it's great to hear about your whole journey there, and as it led up to making a movie, which is great. I can't wait to see it myself. I've seen the teaser of it. It's awesome, very funny. It seems like it's getting great reviews out there too. So really, hats off to you guys for making a cool movie with a small group, especially in the visual effects side.
Thanks. Yeah. I guess just you also asked about films that I watched maybe growing up that really got me into it. And Jurassic Park was like the first movie that I think I purchased. I remember going into Costco and being like, Dad said I could buy this, and I've been saving it up for like a month to like, I've been mowing lawns and whatever to get this thing. And my mom was like, this is PG-13 and you're like 7 years old here. But they had a double box set that was the VHS and the making of, and I watched the making of more than I watched the actual film. I would just hit that on repeat and just study it. I thought it was interesting. It wasn't something that I was like, this is what I want to do. I was like, I'm actually more interested in some of that side of things than I am in the actual film. Not the film isn't so good, but
that's cool. Well, it was the same for me. I was slightly older when I saw it. I think it was 14, 15 when I saw it, but watched it, was like, okay, wow, what did I just see? And then really wanted to figure it out. I bought it as well. I'd read the book, actually, weirdly, before I saw the movie. And I actually did one of my exams at school, in my English exam. I did an essay on Jurassic Park, which was fun. But yeah, I bought the book, The Making of, and just devoured it and tore that thing up, and just tried to consume it and figure out how could I get there as well, basically. Yeah, that's really cool. Any others that really, Lord of the Rings you mentioned?
Lord of the Rings, which also has fantastic behind the scenes. That was also like, I would get those extended. Yeah, that was so cool. Another one,
Diaries, remember that.
Oh, so good. I remember watching Pan's Labyrinth in high school, and feeling like that was a movie that in high school, when I was thinking more about going into science, I remember seeing that movie and being like, oh, this really does a fantastic job of making me like understand, like using film specifically as a language that's different from theater or from anything else, and creating something that is unique to the movie experience. Because many other things, you can get maybe an experience that's similar if you have a really good imagination from like reading a book or something else. But there was something about that movie that just really took advantage of lack of understanding of what is real, what's not real, the horrors of certain visuals, making you really, really uncomfortable, that I felt was unique in a way that I was like, I would like to help make things like this.
Cool.
I mean, Del Toro is just fantastic. So
yeah, incredible movie. It was very, very gruesome in moments, but like beautiful and as well. And I think that's something that just really stuck with me about how film can really powerfully affect emotion, your own emotion. Really, really cool film. Any others?
Those are the big ones. I mean, there were many. I remember when a friend of mine showed me Hero in high school. Was another one that was, I mean, visually, Christopher Doyle, just insane, just so stunning, and the use of color as again like the differentiator of who's telling what story and whatnot. I think that was another big visual punch. I mean, those are all high school. I think though, going back to Pan's Labyrinth, I feel like I've kind of come to see myself in every part of filmmaking as this, like, we're super manipulative. We're trying to force you along a journey without you noticing. So there is this kind of like manipulation side of it that I think I recognize and seeing that and feeling that kind of like, I'm going to take you on this journey. I'm going to make you feel things. That was like really exciting to me, because I remember, I think filmmaking gets me excited when I watch something and I don't see the hand. I mean, it's like a magic trick. You don't see the magic. You don't see the sleight of hand, but you have an emotion. You have a response to it, and that can be like, it can be healing sometimes. I mean, you can watch a movie, and I think a lot of people watch the Barbie movie and they were like, "Am I a toxic person?" Like, there are many sides of that. It can just be comedy. It can be pure comedy. It can be, and if it can be horror, and there's something exciting about being tense for an hour and a half or whatever. I think that you can get a lot of emotions from film, and so like as filmmakers, from whatever perspective, whether it's visual effects or director of photography or acting or whatever else, I mean, you're taking someone else on a journey, and you have to recognize that. And I think that Pan's Labyrinth was the first time that maybe I as a like younger person explicitly remember being like, I was taken on a journey. I don't think I would have picked up a book with this description. Now I would, but at that point I was reading fantasy and sci-fi, and while that plays into those, it wouldn't have in the description. But it took me somewhere I wouldn't have gone otherwise, and that's exciting.
When you started looking into, because you were inspired by those movies, and you started to look at the behind the scenes and how people made it, and then it affected your educational experience by the sounds of it. What things did you realize that you wanted to start learning, and how what was your educational experience like?
So I visited, I think it was Full Sail in Florida, and walked through their like visual effects before I applied to Tisch, or around that same time. And I remember walking through there and seeing a bunch of people in a big dark room, nobody talking to each other, and a huge clock on the wall that was a countdown, and that was when their student projects were due. And essentially, once that countdown reached 0, then you couldn't turn your project in anymore. That was how it functioned, or how I understood it. And I looked at that and I was like, I want to do something more collaborative. And so that's kind of how I landed in production, because it felt more collaborative to me. And it's not actually, you need more than just yourself to do most things in film. So I think it was just like a maybe somewhat naive initial reaction from me that kind of got jerked away from it. But as soon as I got into NYU, I tended to just shift more toward the visual side of things. So whether that ended up being director of photography work or visual effects work or whatever, that's where it ended up being. And I think that's just like me to some extent. I am a very visual person. I remember taking a test, I think sometime in high school, and it was just like, here's a list of 20 words, here's a list of 20 pictures, study it for 2 minutes or something, and then we'll take it away for 5 minutes, and then we'll give you a piece of paper. We'll see how much you can fill out. Remember. And I remember the word list, I could get halfway down, maybe. And the picture list, they handed me a piece of paper back, and I remember being like, all right, I remember where every piece is. And I don't have perfect like photographic memory at all, but certain visual things were, they really just, that side of things sticks with me. Visual language sticks with me, and so that was kind of a giving back. Visual language changes how I feel, and so that's kind of, it felt natural to be like, all right, I'm going to take that and I'm going to use my understanding of it to push that back, whether it's visual effects or, camera, lighting, whatever else.
I'd love to ask you about your most recent film, because I think it's just super interesting and really quite pioneering as well. How did the film come about?
So Michael Litwack is the director of Molly and Max in the Future, which just came out in theaters about a week ago, and it'll be streaming in, I think, 3 weeks. So it'll be back out then. So
is it going to stream just before you continue? Because somebody asked.
I'm actually not 100% sure where it's going to stream. They do have an Instagram that they post all of it, and that would be Molly and Max in the Future. It's just Molly with an I, Molly and Max in the Future. They've got a website too, but yeah, I'm not sure what platforms. I'm pretty sure iTunes at the very least, but I don't know streaming services wise.
We'll share the links as they as you say things out today as well, because we're live and people are here and asking questions. And to that point, if anyone has questions for Zach, do ask them, because we are live right now, unless you're watching the recording. But right now it's live. So yeah, tell me, keep talking about the kind of how it came together.
So yeah, I knew Michael from school, but I didn't know him super well. I ended up getting involved with the visual effects on his senior thesis. He had somebody else doing it, and then they had some time commitment thing. And I was like, I got a couple weeks off. I kind of know After Effects. I've done it for some friends. Let me hop on board, and it seems really fun. I mean, he had a bunch of like puppetry and a lot of there were like people riding on a giant bear, and like there was the bear was a puppet that he had filmed, and the people were like on a big green blanket kind of thing. So it was a bunch of very like, I wasn't doing any 3D work. It was all 2D compositing on that. So I kind of got to know him that way, and then we have shot little things over the last essentially 8-10 years here. And then he had talked to me about shooting his next film, which was an adaptation of that film, which kind of stuck in limbo for a very long time getting funding. And he was getting ready to like go into production there, but a little frustrated with how long it was taking, because it took years and years to get that thing going, even though he had a script for a while. So 2020 happened, and early in 2020 he was basically like, his investor stepped out. They were like, I don't know what's going on, COVID's happening, everything's shut down, we're not going to fund this movie to happen in 2020. So he was like, understandable, nobody's really shooting right now. So I'll write something that I can make with my friends in my garage if I have to. And so that was the gist of that script of Molly and Max. The majority of it is either there is some like stop motion, there's like some mech fights, and they were done stop motion by Buddy, and then everything else is just like set extension backgrounds. There are no huge action scenes that aren't mech related or other thing. Everything was like contained. So something that truly, if we had to, we were both like, we'll shoot it in a garage somewhere. We'll shoot it. We'll make this happen. However, it will happen. And we didn't shoot it in a garage. We ended up making some contacts within the virtual production world in New York, and so we shot. It's about a third. It's a third on an LED stage, so all in-camera VFX for a third of it, and then 2/3 is we didn't have enough time in the stage due to their schedule. So we shot it on a projection screen. It wasn't rear projection, it was front projection. But we shot a third that way and then a third green screen. So everything is shot on stage. There's not a single real location. And the majority of the backgrounds are pretty minimal in terms of builds. The way that they were set up was a lot of like, all right, we're on a rooftop, so we'll kind of like build just the very basics right here. And then the backdrop is going to be miniatures. So we built and shot a lot of miniatures, which then we did either projection or put up on the LED wall and used that way. So it ended up being this big blend of many things. Miniatures also I got involved on because I, as part of my quarantine project, kind of built a lot of miniatures, got into 3D printing and 3D scanning and that sort of thing. So yeah, that also was just kind of like something that sounded fun. And so I got into that side of production as well, which I would not normally be involved in.
Wow, it sounds like really, really fun. And I think what a lot of people imagine, and it's the case most of the time, or historically has been, that you have large teams, and ILM grew to a huge company of lots and lots of hundreds of people on each project. But what you're talking about is similar to the beginning phases of ILM, them literally doing it in a warehouse in Van Nuys and trying to figure it out. And here we are at that point again in filmmaking where we're now able to experience that again. And we don't see it a lot, but it's starting to see it a little bit more. So it's really fascinating that you're as you're explaining this, just to keep emphasizing the fact that you guys did this with a small team. And I've seen at least the teaser of it. It looks great and really funny. And I think a lot of the time people feel like you can't accomplish this unless you have a giant team. But as you guys are proving, not necessarily the case. So it's very cool.
Yeah, it was Michael and myself did the majority of the VFX, the two of us. And there are hundreds of VFX shots in the film.
How did you choose between? Sorry, go ahead. You were gonna.
No, well, we had a couple other folks doing some tracking and some keying of things as well. So it wasn't only the two of us, but we did. I think pretty much everything was rendered from one of the two of us, our homes.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of tools and techniques did you use on that side for the visual effects? What kind of software and hardware?
We were running in After Effects. I'm fairly comfortable After Effects or Nuke or whatever, but Michael is much more comfortable on After Effects. And so, because it was such a small team, it was like we're not retraining anybody here. We're going to use something that is good enough for this, and it worked pretty well. And so everything was rendered out of After Effects. The pipeline was basically, we shot all the miniatures mostly on an A7R or an A7S, depending on if we were doing video or stills. And then everything was composited in After Effects, including any of the 2D plates we were using for backgrounds. So anything that was 2D that went up on the wall or on rear projection was from After Effects. And then what I did was I had a desktop setup on set where I had Resolve running and DaVinci Resolve. And so I had all of those plates and I had them all set up so that I could live grade them essentially on the background. So I would have a little desktop setup and I'd have a monitor sent there. So once we would have our general setup, lighting wise and whatnot, I would sit down there and dial in our contrast and levels and whatnot for the background as they finished rehearsing, and then hop back on over. For the 3D stuff, that was all Unreal, which that LED stage was run by some folks by a company called The Family and Choreographics, and the locations, they helped set up some of this stuff, and then ultimately I ended up building out the locations mostly using Quixel assets, but we also used some assets that we 3D scanned, miniatures that we used to film stuff for the 2D plates. We then also 3D scanned and dropped them in Unreal and used those, not in a big way, but in a small way. But it was nice to see that crossover, that those miniatures could be used. And moving forward, I want to do more of that, because there is something kind of tangible about like having a miniature built and scanned and dropping it in, and it not feeling like the scale is a little, like it's just little things that are like purposefully not quite right, that make something feel more tangible, more real. Having grit in there, having some of those kind of funky little byproducts, which I don't know, I really love though. I really love that stuff.
Me too. Yeah, the unintended imperfections that are often better than the intended ones. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
How did you choose between those different modes, having green and projection and LED? What was the driver for which one you would use?
It depended to some extent on the set, to be honest. I could bring up some examples, if you want to look at examples of different frames that are on each one.
Yeah, you could show them. Just bear in mind, most people are going to be listening to the podcast, but yeah, happy to.
I'll describe things. So we did some tests initially, and this is our director, Michael, on an initial test, and this is the green screen version, and then you'll see this is the rear, this is front projection, but this is our projection version. And immediately, I think you just see things like glass and somewhat transparent objects are night and day, so different. And so anything that we wanted a little bit more translucency, glass, that sort of thing, we tried to figure out a way to make that done, either projection or schedule that to be on our volume days. So there's a car scene that is the very first scene in the film, and that scene we did on an LED stage, but we shoot through the glass of the car, and he has glasses on, and there's just a lot going on where I think it was kind of the merging of these two realizations where we were like, well, since we want to shoot this on a stage, whether it's projection or LED, and since we're forcing that to happen, we can also add in the like glasses, and he's got a space helmet that's a big whole like acrylic thing that's, you know, partially transparent and stuff like that. So those decisions, if we were forced to shoot green screen, I think with the knowledge of how small our team was, we might have it would have been some conversations with production design and art department as to whether or not some of those things were doable. So it was this kind of back and forth of what's our schedule look like. Some of these things are really necessary, like, you know, shooting in our spaceship, which was just a Honda Civic, and shooting through that glass and stuff like that. So yeah, there was like a workshop scene, and there's on this frame probably about most of the stuff that you see in the near background is all real, but there are a lot of like partially transparent pieces of glass and reflections and things like that. And so, yeah, we wouldn't have done that if that was green screen, but we felt like we wanted to take advantage of it, and we knew that we had that option. So whenever we could, we would. But let's see. There's
process-wise, when you were looking through these shots, and in terms of the before they were shot, you were probably looking at storyboards and style frames and that kind of thing. Did you have like literally a list of the shots and like a column saying this one for LED, this one for green?
Yeah, we were trying to figure out what the best way to do that, and we ended up landing on Google Slides because we could access it, and then it would just or Google Sheets. We had a Sheets document.
Yeah.
And so slowly, I mean, it started out as basic shot list, and then more columns of what location this is, what props can we add, what little things here and there. And then just everyone slowly got added to that document. That document got huge. I mean, it was way too big. And then we ended up essentially, I mean, yeah, that document just became really big and ended up staying with us all the way till the end of production. Just because, or the end of post-production, just because pretty much every shot had some VFX in it. Even if we did it on an LED stage, there was still like, oh, we want a little hologram floating over here. So we will add the little hologram, but that's going to be a post thing. That's not going to be done on set.
Got it. Yeah. It's really, really fascinating. And weirdly, people probably think you use these big, clever systems for managing shot lists, but actually on Jungle Book we had Google Sheets as well. We used that.
That's funny.
For a whole bunch of it. Yeah.
Well, it's nice. Yeah, it's live, and so you can share it with however many people, and you just always know that you're looking at the most up-to-date version. And Google, just as a company, very rarely has an internet, any sort of downtime. So there's just like a little bit of security on the side of that.
Yeah, no, that's really important, I think. And I'd love to ask a little bit more about that, because what you're describing is collaboration and remote collaboration, and we all used to be in the same building together and have to do everything on bits of paper and film stock and all that kind of stuff. But like we're now at this point, we can collaborate on the production side of things, the administrative side, but also the production of 3D. How did you manage, I guess, the collaborative design process, whether that's 2D or 3D?
So on the 3D side of things, we were set up with Perforce, and the studio that we were working with, Choreographics and the family, they had an account through Suite.io, I think is the name of the company, and they let you log in remotely to quite powerful machines that you can set up. And so I got a login for them, and then that was like Perforce sunk with the computers on the stage. And so for the weeks leading up, I would tweak things, and that would then I could tweak things in the evening and then go in and test things the next day on the stage, and go back and forth that way. And other people could be tweaking things as well. But we didn't have a huge crew.
Virtual machines?
I think, I'm actually not sure from the technical side how they set things up, but it was, I mean, we selected, I know we could select specific NVIDIA cards to run Unreal on. And so, it was, I'm not sure exactly what their technical side of things was, but it was pretty great because it was all set up through Perforce. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I just finished doing a Perforce workshop for CG Pro like we did 2 weeks of training on Perforce to get people set up, and we had everybody collaborating into an AWS instance of a Perforce and synchronizing between projects. And yes, it was super cool being able to work that way, having come from a very like technical debt laden, I know, hardware driven in a studio environment. Like now we can do all of this online and remotely. It's super cool.
Yeah, and I think that's also partly my interest in shifting a little bit back more into VFX than what I'd been doing over the past 10 years, is that I think that there is, to some extent, a slow merging in not most circumstances, but some circumstances of kind of visuals. Like, and so being in charge of things from a director photography standpoint, and then being able to kind of continue that all the way to the end, I think there is a big benefit in that sort of things. And so being able to do that and then being able to do that remotely is more exciting to me than having to like go into an office somewhere and then just sit in front of a computer, because that's ultimately like not what I'm trying to do. Even if I'm sitting in front of a computer, making sure that it's collaborative in some way, or at least comfortable, where it's like, all right, I don't have to like, if I'm living in New York, I don't have to go to the office and then come back to my little apartment and then go to the, if I can like do that remotely somewhere warm for at least half the year in New York, then that's a little preferred.
Right. Yeah, put some productivity gains as well without having to commute all over the place. We getting a couple of questions coming in here. Somebody's just checking, was it Sweet.io, the company?
Yeah. Let me triple check that. I think so.
I think we've got some interest in knowing. We can send people some links to what that was. It sounded cool for sure.
Yeah, sweetstudios.io. But yeah, that's what it is.
Studios.io. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you. And somebody else is asking another question here. It's a good one. How did you approach cinematography and VFX? What was the language you had between the director and the cinematographer?
Well, I mean, in this circumstance specifically, I am both. So it was really just between me and the director, or me and the production designer, or the gaffer and the AC. I mean, first of all, it helps to work with people you've worked with before. And so having a gaffer on, Jesse Moritz was our gaffer, and it was a very small crew, so there's very little telephone being played. But having somebody that you have worked with before, and having them on for the whole job, you really start to get some shorthand of little tricks and whatnot. I think that we had a huge book that maybe Michael was more in charge of, that was just visual language. And it was just like a giant PDF that was general vibes. And then he broke that down into things that also included production design and everything else. And then I split off versions of that were general camera language that I made partly for myself, but then I share with the AC. And that stuff I think is helpful, because everyone's kind of checking themselves. Like, I have this big document, I have to keep myself honest by putting actual pen to paper and images down and saying, here, yeah, we had a production Bible, as someone commented. I keep myself honest by having this thing and sharing it with people. And then day one of production, I'm talking to the AC, and I'm like, look, if you see something and you feel like, based off what you understand from the decks that we've talked about, and you're like, we are set up on a 35, I think we should be backed up on a 50. or this, that, or the other thing. Tell me. I mean, don't just do it, but like, let's have that discussion, because I think in a very small production like this, my head's a little spinning sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with bringing that up. And I think that's where everybody can find some satisfaction in the creative side of things, even people that are technical. And I think that not everybody wants that, and some people just want technical and be on set, and that's fine. But I think that for department heads, usually I try to surround myself with people that want to be technical, and it can be tough sometimes, because then they'll stop gaffing and go be DPs after a couple of years, or go, after ACing for a couple of years, they want to operate and shoot or whatnot, which is great, and I want that, but it makes for a somewhat revolving team sometimes. Yes, I mean, it's surrounding yourself with people you trust, and who are creative and who want to be creative, and then making yourself honest with these decks, and sharing them, having conversations. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, having a source of truth you can all go to and season and keep improving and keep referring back to. Yeah. Get those movies where you're in the same place at the same time. You can build a big room with the art on the walls, but like there is a digital online version of that, and I like slides too, because there's other tools you can use, but slides is a good way of adding imagery, and then spreadsheets you can do the same thing. Yeah, pretty cool what you can do. It's kind of for free online.
Yeah, and people can comment things on slides and stuff like that too. So like, I feel like those documents are just kind of forever living. And I found myself walking around with an iPad most days, and the beginning of the day or beginning of a scene, pulling up, 2 or 3 images and being like, this is what we talked about. This is what we're looking for. And it's a constant refresher, with everybody. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's important to. The one big thing I will say is like, have your reference up all the time, basically. And whenever someone's making something, they ask you for feedback. Well, look, what do you think this looks like? Like, where's your reference? What's it supposed to look like? And then if they don't have it, they tend to answer the question like, it doesn't look good enough yet, because you're not quite sure what you're making if you don't have something to refer to. And yeah, that's really cool to hear. And another question that came up here is someone is asking, how did you get a theatrical release?
That was not my doing. I mean, the film, we finished it I guess we finished in beginning of August, I think it was, of 2022, and started doing VFX immediately. The editor, Joanna Ogle, who is fantastic, and she basically cranked out an edit within a couple of weeks. She was working on the piece during production, and we were shooting somewhat chronologically, so she had a little bit of a head start. But like, it was like 2 weeks after I got an email with a rough cut. And then a couple weeks after that, we decided that some scenes were good enough to start doing some rough visual effects on. So we had and then we were submitting to festivals, and we got into South by Southwest without a final VFX. We were picture locked, but there were chunks of that film that were completely green. I mean, the last 10 minutes or so are mostly projections. So like, I think you still kind of like, it wrapped up in a way that felt real, but there was a chunk of the middle of it that was green screen. And yeah, we got in, and they were like, you need to get us a good version of this by X date. Yeah, finish it. So it ended up being, the director had 2 computers in his house, and I had 5 in my apartment by the end of it. And they were all rendering stuff. So I kind of joke that we didn't pay for heat for the apartment for most of the winter.
Well, you did.
Just
You
because
just
of
didn't
all
do it the
these.
conventional way.
Yeah, not in the conventional way. Yeah, oh, we paid for it for sure. But yeah, it just became kind of a mad rush with the deadline. Um, and I think part of one reason I think I like working with Michael is that he understands from a VFX side of things, when it's done, when it's like, all right, we can tweak this forever, we can make all of these little changes, but at one point, does this change that I want to make not have any difference in emotional response? And I think that kind of comes back to my filmmaking ethos, and that's just I want to be able to make things that give people an emotional response, and at some point this image will get there, and hopefully it's not distracting, if it's not the perfect VFX, but as soon as it's not distracting, then it's like, how can we make this push us more or less in which direction? And if we're far enough in that way, then let's be done. We can always find something that we'll nitpick, but we don't have to. So
Right, yeah, never done. Never done, but
never
sometimes
done.
time to move
It's
on.
so hard to watch it now, though. I'm like, I changed this, I changed that, but no, it's done.
People do keep redoing movies, though. No, there's a history of that. Like
Yeah.
George Lucas and whoever else, they do go back and revisit movies sometimes. Generally not, but yeah, it's really cool to hear anyway. Just the process and the reality of it, and the fact how much you could accomplish with a small team, given the skills. I was curious because you mentioned our course, which you did, and it was in cinematography and lighting. I was wondering how that affected things, or how that maybe impacted it.
I mean, from a very explicit standpoint, like you can see, I remember a couple weeks in, we were talking about fog and getting atmosphere in, and I basically just copied and pasted techniques we were doing there. You can, if you know what you're looking for, you could probably see it in the background of some of the Unreal shots and be like, oh yeah, I can see that rolling fog in the back. That was probably done using whatever. So, from that perspective, I think that there are very clear examples of things that I took directly from class and put it on, because I was building those backdrops at the same time. And so sometimes if I'd have an issue, I'd just go in and ask Wolfie and Gabriel, what's going on? How do I fix this? Or this looks really good, but the machine can't handle it anymore. So, what are the little check boxes that I've just forgotten to turn off? So from those perspectives, I think it made a big difference. But then I think from the cinematography side of things, it's, as of someone working in film, you can surround yourself with many people who also work in film and who have done film for a long time, and you get this shorthand of how to do things easy and quick, because that's necessary. You need to find shortcuts to make your day, to survive. And it's all about deciding which shortcuts right for that day, that time, and you get used to some of those things, and I think that's necessary, but it's not always good long term. And being in a class with people who question kind of everything, because the class was about half people working in production and half people who I think had come from a bit more of game design and the a different side of Unreal, makes you remember that you need to question things. And so it's good to just have some of those moments of, okay, all right, I have this scene, these are the shots I would probably do to cover this. And then remembering to force yourself, why do I need this shot? Am I just shooting coverage to shoot coverage because that's what I'm used to? Or am I shooting, like, how do I want to change things? Do I want to change my shots into over the shoulders? How close do I want their eye lines? Do I want to change it into French overs? Like, are they just singles, isolated? What does each one of those decisions mean? And I think about that, but I think having that class that started out with the basics of like why cinematography is necessary to think about those decisions was a nice little reminder. And I don't know, I remind myself many different ways, but it was a nice reminder to have right before production, to just kind of like shake out any jitters and be like, no, just, every day is school to some extent. You're going to learn something every day. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it was really, really cool to have had you in the class, and rare that someone's actually making, well, not necessarily rare that someone's making something and using a class to help with the process, but making an entire feature, more rare for sure. And it's just so cool to see what you've done here with a small team, and thinking about that idea. And sort of projecting towards the future, there's obviously a lot of conversations going on around at the moment around the process and around seeing some of these things emerging through machine learning techniques. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how that, either how it's impacting things already or how maybe it will impact things in the future.
I think there's kind of two sides of it, and I think that it's really, some of these things can be really beneficial to small teams that are like, hey, I just don't have I want to tell a story and I don't have the financial means in many circumstances to tell this story with the crew size that it maybe needed 20 years ago. If we could take some of these little parts of this, whether that's like rotoscoping, I mean, we used a decent amount of like machine learning rotoscoping on our project, but that's just going to those little things are going to become more and more every little thing. So I think that's something that will just happen. I don't think that there's any stopping that, because it's just it's almost impossible it would have not been possible for us to rotoscope everything by hand without either outsourcing it to somebody else anyway, or something else, or having years added onto our timeline. So having those little things is useful and will creep. Seeing those things shift into the creative side, I think, will also happen. I don't think there's any way we can stop that from happening. I think that it's something where it's like, once the automobile or the airplane was invented, there was never going to be somebody that was going to ground that thing or stop that from happening. It would just slowly become ubiquitous to how we function in our day-to-day lives. And I think AI is the same thing. I think we have to be careful about it. We don't want to just like let it take over everything, but I think it's also going to make impactful stories mean even more as storytelling gets easier, and as filmmaking gets easier, and as it becomes democratized in a way. I think that people are going to be drawn more and more to stories that they can relate with on some level, but it's hard for me to imagine a future where somebody is like, oh, I love movies directed by GPT-12 or something. I just like, I think that it will have a place, but I think that it will not be the like overarching place. And it is a little scary saying that, because I do think that means that a lot of jobs are going to disappear. And in the same way that like stables and whatnot disappeared when the auto industry took over, I think that there'll be a shift, and the question will really be like, are we, who's going to be a mechanic and who's not? But in the same realm, we still have people riding horses and finding a huge amount of enjoyment doing those things. But you're not doing it for practical reasons anymore, usually. I mean, there are some people absolutely that are, but in most circumstances, you're doing it because you want to. And so I think that, I don't know that that's like in the next year, but I think that in the coming couple years, decade, people are going to keep making films, but they might be doing it the old school way because they want to. And I think I'm to some extent in that camp. I mean, we use a lot of miniatures in this film in Mali, and we didn't have to. We could have done that in 3D, but it's more fun. Like, it might not look more photorealistic. In fact, it absolutely does not look more photorealistic, but that's kind of neat. I think there's something like really nice about things that feel real. And I think it all ties back in watching the new Del Toro Pinocchio on Netflix is really like, there is something a little more tangible about how he does stop motion versus watching the Pinocchio that Disney put out around the same time. One of them feels to me like a more interesting experience, even if it's not like perfectly photoreal or whatnot. Not to call, some of Pinocchio's stuff perfectly photoreal. Obviously, there's like it's a puppet. That's not a real thing happening. But I think that the Del Toro one, I have a bit more of a tangible. There's more tangible side to it, and both of those movies got made, and I think that will continue happening. We'll see both sides of them. There'll be both versions, but it will just be, some people are going to do it because they want to do it in that side because it's more fun to them, and there'll be another side of the industry that is helped by AI a lot more.
That's great. It's a great take on it. There's so much, I guess, curiosity, let's call it that, around what this is. That's one way of saying it.
Yeah, what it is.
Yeah, but nobody really knows where it's going to go. Everyone's kind of waxing intellectual about it and wants to be the one to predict the future of Bitcoin or AI or whatever it is. But nobody really gets to know for sure. But it's really interesting to hear your opinion on it anyway, your take on it, and how it has begun to creep into the process, at least in terms of assisting and empowering and helping you be able to do a lot of what, I mean, I started my career in match move and getting cameras out of film plates and probably a lot of that type of work in roto and various other things which I never really wanted to do or spend my time doing as an artist. Hopefully that will give us more time to focus on the creative components. And what would you say to somebody kind of starting out, maybe in this day and age where there's so much change and so many things up in the air around how we do this? What would you recommend to somebody starting out?
I mean, you gotta have fun. You gotta have fun doing it. I think that like the industry is like, it's been just wild the last few years. So there's no prediction that I think that I can comfortably make in where it's going to go, like what you said. But the combination of COVID and then strikes, I mean, a lot of the strikes relating to AI and that sort of thing, and trying to sort out where those places fit or don't fit in the industry, I think that's going to keep happening. And I think for someone starting out, find the part of it that you actually really like and see if you can do it. I mean, I think that going into film, I was hesitant about it as a career, but I decided this is probably terrible financial advice, I decided I would try it anyway because it seemed like a more tangible like reality for how I wanted to live my life later. It felt like something that I could see, and part of that was because I was doing it to some extent in high school. But I think the other side of it just kind of came later. The actual like career money side of it. And you have to be realistic. It's maybe not a great idea to, put all of your eggs into a certain basket. But if you really like what you're doing and you find that you can be okay with making other I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but yeah, if you want to do something in film and you think that you will enjoy that lifestyle, then understand what it might take to do that lifestyle, whether that's like where you're going to live or how you're going to live. Because if my goal is to like travel all over the world and live a very luxurious lifestyle, and fly on private jets, then I'm not going to be doing that by making films out of my garage. But that's not the point. That sounds fun, sure, but that's not. I gave that idea up, I think, quite a long time ago, and I think that understanding and being like, all right, well, I can fit these two things together. And I would rather make things in a garage with my friends or in a real studio with my friends, and enjoy doing that than, work in an office and on Wall Street and, make a lot more money, and have a more consistent job and have healthcare and many other things taken care of. It's all a decision. Everything has some give or take, and I'm happy with where I am now. So, yeah.
That's wonderful to hear and encouraging. And I think Wall Street also goes through its own problems and tricky times where it's not so great to be in. Too.
Yeah.
It seems like most industries go through these woeful times, and then it usually doesn't last forever, and we figure it out, and artists adapt. And but do what you love is what I took from what you just said, and follow your intuition and your heart, and go towards things that you love to do. Yeah,
and also like pull from other parts of your life. If you're, I do like to travel, and so I have tried to get onto like more, docs or stuff like that when I really get an itch to travel. There are outlets to that. So if it's like, oh, I like to do this, but there probably is a version of filmmaking that lives within that niche that can scratch a couple itches at the same time. You just have to find it. So find those things and see if you can make them work together.
Try things, yeah. Try stuff out. See what it's like. You never know until you give it a go.
Yeah.
One last question we got from the audience here before we wrap is someone's asking, any tips for someone like me and a friend making a feature in my garage with Unreal? Sorry.
The thing that I think is helpful is just to like start, just to not wait, and also understand that everything can be iterative. And I think that's been part of the process of getting this film done over the last few years, because we would shoot plates of miniatures and then we would do a test and be like, this angle's a little off, or this is a little off, the lighting is a little whatever. So then we'd go back and shoot. And then everything, don't feel like you have to use everything you shoot, but also don't not shoot because you might not use it. It's very, if we would have spent all day being like, okay, I think it's this exact angle. No, let's try this, whatever. We would have burned so much time, but I think that when we just shot a plate and put it up the next day, then we learned what we needed to and kept doing it, and that got faster and faster. And we built out a pipeline for how we ended up shooting all of our miniature plates, which is very fun and very specific. But that pipeline only came from iteration, and you only get iteration by doing something. So if you're waiting around for getting your funding for your $10 million feature, maybe you should see how you can write a feature that doesn't need $10 million. The mech fights were animated from guy that we found, I think, on Fiverr that made some of these animations with Legos. So they're literally, the mech fights are like Lego builds that this guy built out, and we had some iterations back and forth of all of the animations. But we had those iterations because we had some time, because we started that process very early. He was, if I remember correctly, he was sending us stuff before we even went into production. We sent him boards, we sent him storyboards and exact shots that we were looking for, and then he would send us stuff before we were even in production, and then throughout production, and then at the end. But yeah, it was just, don't wait.
Just get on with it.
Yeah, just get on with it, but don't be precious. Don't feel like just because you did something, it's good, because there's a very good likelihood that just because you did something, it needs to be good. And a friend of mine mentioned something recently that was like the feeling of every time you make a film, it has to be better than the last one. It doesn't have to be better than the last one. Because if it's better than the last one, then like maybe it's too similar to your last one. Try a different style, try a different format, try something else, or just do the same with a different story. But it's not necessarily going to get better, but if it's worse, hopefully you learn something. So, yeah. Maybe the better one is every other one should be really good. Right. And then the other half should be... Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Well, I feel like we could go on for more hours, but I want to just, before we wrap, ask if there's anywhere that people can find out more about the movie, about you, about things that you are doing. If you have any like behind the scenes things that people could check out.
Yeah. So Molly and Max it had its theatrical run, and it is going to be out mid-March. I think but all that information is going to be, best place to find it is through their Instagram, which is Molly and Max in the future. And they keep posting stuff. And if you're interested in BTS, they are also posting a lot of BTS videos. So if you want to see some of those Lego mechs, they're going to be on that Instagram. If you want to see how we did some of the miniature buildings, because we shot those all in a whole bunch of passes, those are going to be on there, as well as all sorts of other fun stuff on there. So that Instagram's good. For me, my name is Zach Stoltzfus. My website is zachstoltzfus.com. And if you want to kind of keep track of what I'm up to, my Instagram is not Zach S. So I am Zach Stoltzfus, but my Instagram is not Zach S. So follow me there or shoot me an email. All that stuff is on my website. And yeah, let's chat.
Fantastic. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us today. It's great to see you again, and great to hear about what you've been up to. I think, and congratulations as well, because
thank you.
I know it's a big deal to make a feature film and get it released in the theater. So I I salute you, and then yeah, looking forward to hanging out soon.
Thanks. Yeah, same. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks also to our studio audience. Thanks for coming today and hanging out and asking great questions. Look forward to seeing you guys soon as well. If you enjoyed today, we'll have another podcast in 2 weeks. We also have our Facebook group and our website, becomecgpro.com, if you want to find out more about the courses. We talked a little bit about one today. And we also have open days every month. So I believe our next one is on March the 3rd, the 5th. How about that? 5th, March the 5th. So come and hang out with us live and ask more in depth about the school if you'd like. But yeah, just again, been great. Thank you. Thanks again, Zach. Yeah, wow. I feel inspired and looking forward to the future. Maybe with Molly and Max in it.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.